Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. In this episode, we are looking at TAL-MOD. MOD is a small but very accessible modular synthesizer from TAL. We've looked at most of TAL's stuff now, so nothing new in a sense there. But this one is not for everybody. But if it's a path you decide to go down, there is a lot to like. Before we go much further with anything, I'm actually going to play you a full piece. It's a full-length piece that I've written just with TAL-MOD, anti-reverb and delays, just to give you a sense of, well, this is kind of how it sounds. No, it's not going to provide every possible sound that the instrument could make, but it gives you a sense of the instrument as it might sound, particularly as it might have sounded assuming that we were doing something kind of early 80s. So if you are hearing shades of things like Airlane or Astrodyne, you probably are. There we go. Full piece made 100% with TAL-MOD. echo's just coming back. Very much in the mould of one of those instrumentals like Astrodyne or Airlane, our pop-up covers from about 1980, deliberately not trying to sound like anything other than what it is. You hear how we've got various sounds. They're quite simple sounds, so we're focusing on the tone, the timbre, and the nice movement in them, just to show, this is what it'll do. Plus, I also wanted to show this is one of those instruments where you can use it for absolutely every sound in the mix. Drums, the whole lot, everything was built from scratch. I'll run through that just to prove that for you. So, drums, that's our kick, our snare. I can't remember the exact tuning for all of these, doesn't much matter. Hi-hat, toms, complete with auto pan, woohoo! Bass. So that very sort of Rolandy, it's pre-Juno sound, but anywhere from sort of Jupiter 4 to Juno 60 kind of a sound. Again, rather Rolandy, sort of probably Jupiter 4, again, early Juno sort of sound. Yes, I spent quite a lot of time in the piece showing that sound because not all pulses move that nicely, but Tal does a nice job with his pulses, probably as a result of having done all that Roland clone work, means that his pulses move nicely. That's not quite the same as, I think it's an ARP 2600 or maybe an Odyssey in Astrodyne, but it still moves pretty darn well. And yes, that does play triplets. Really nice strings. They manage to feel light and floaty at the same time. EQ does help. This is fully mixed, so there's EQ and what have you, but very little processing as such. And then the pretty standard sample and hold or random LFO, making that happen. Let's have a quick look at the site. So this is TAL's TAL-MOD, short for modular synthesizer. It is deliberately, as it said, designed that you don't need to be an expert in synthesis, or particular in modular synthesis, to get a lot, if not everything that's needed out of this instrument. I am a real fan of TAL's approach to the market. It's very sort of humble. It doesn't overly gild his lily, but what he says tends to actually be what you get and what you can do. Obviously, being an instrument, it's up to you what you do with it. So if you buy an instrument going, oh, well, this is going to make me an Uber star, you probably, it's going to be an interesting ride for you for a few years there. Once you get to the point of realizing that it's a thing that you do stuff with, that you make do stuff, and particularly once you get hit around this whole note business, then the instrument is very capable, and bearing in mind its price point and its limits, there's an awful lot that can be done with it. So if you're looking at something like, say, the 101 bassline that I just reviewed, which I think is a beautiful little instrument, I really do, and going, but I want to be able to do more, and even the same thing if you're looking at his Jupiter 8, then this is possibly a path for you, because it gives you the ability to essentially do what the 101 bassline synth does and the Jupiter 8 does, but in a broader platform. It's a little less likely to, out of the box, sound as exactly like, but exactly like's always a really bad plan. The guys at the time in 1980 who were using those instruments were busy trying to get their own sound. Yes, there was a certain similarity because they were using the same gear and what have you, the same chorus units and what and the like, but they were looking for something that made them stand out. So look for something that makes you stand out. Well-described instrument in terms of pricing. You're looking at 60 US plus any taxes in your country. So what that makes it comparable to is, well, I guess the thing to mind there is is Uhi's Ace, which is a similar, simple modular synth. There are certain things that Ace has that are a little beyond what TAL does, but there are, well, not only dollar advantages on TAL's side, but I think it's possibly a simpler instrument all round. I think by the time you get to understanding why those things that are in the Uhi thing are possibly a big deal, and I'm not going to say they are necessarily any better, but possibly a big deal, you might be more suited to something like his Batzilla, which is a real kind of a modular powerhouse. If you're looking for a simple-ish, central but very capable device out of which you could do basically a bit of everything outside of samples, then I think the TAL-MOD has a tremendous amount to offer. Here's what it looks like. We've got 3 oscillators, a pair of filters. If you notice, there are a whole lot of jacks, so you can plug things from one place to another, and that's largely how you carry signal around to make one thing make another go all kinds of wobbly. We've got 3 envelopes of the ADSR variety and a modulation envelope, which is an MSEG, but just the one of them. There's also a sequencer which matches that in the baseline 101, and again, will not be getting into. It most likely does work rather well, but I just never touch these. There are a couple of effects on board. High pass filter, that's kind of cool. It's nice that that is there. A simple one-band EQ, but that again is a nice bonus. It can give you an ability to focus a sound. A chorus, which is of the Juno chorus variety, so the chorus 1, chorus 2 type thing. It does do the job. And a delay, which I'm not sold on. I don't think it's a great solution, but you know that I am never a big fan of onboard effects. Same with the reverb. If it's working for you, great. Otherwise, I think, leave those things to the mix where they matter. You've got master controls, a pair of LFOs, and then a direct noise oscillator with the ability to change color and what have you, and a couple of knobs that you can assign to things. That's our overview. Let's look at the good and bad. I think you've probably got a good sense of what I'm going to say. What's really good is that it's very simple and it's very honest. There's no flim-flam, frou-frou suggestion that this is going to do things that no synthesizer is going to do. It's just saying, here it is, and this is what it will do, and it will do it, and it will do it very well. It sounds good. Yes, there is a tendency to lean towards that Roland sound, but you know what? A lot of people are very eager for the Roland sound. This doesn't specifically nail any instrument, but if you are trying to get that feel, then you're kind of halfway there. Will it sound like anything else? Well, that's kind of really up to you and how you process it. The fact that it's got a slightly more complex architecture, and of course that you can process things after the synth, amazing. Apply effects, apply your own drive units, apply whatever. Then I think that, bar saying that will it sound like Serum, which it obviously won't because it's not wavetable, and nor does it have that approach. It will sound like whatever you are ready, willing, and able to make it sound like. I don't think that it's a master of FM or heavy digital synthesis. It will do FM, so I'm not saying it doesn't, but I don't think it's a master there. See it as being an analog type model, as I say again, with that Roland bias. In terms of pricing, I think it's very fair for what you get. You got a lot of ability to do things. Whether you choose it, up to you. But for the quality and the care that he puts into his devices overall, very good, very fair pricing. I always try to put in, well, what are the bads or what are the limits? As usual, yeah, the effects are not wonderful. It is limited as a full modular, so if you come into this thinking that you could replace the largest Moog wall synthesizer modular you ever saw, or some crazy full-on Euro rack kind of device with this for like, you know, a thousandth of the cost, well, I guess you're probably going in the wrong direction already. It is got what it does, and it does it very well. It, as I said, doesn't attempt to approach digital styles in any particular way, and that's good because it lets him focus on what he does do. If you're wanting to get out into sample territory, then of course there is his sampler, which there is a review of as well. Go look it up. It's a very nice device. If I had to choose one over the other, I probably would go with the sampler just because there's greater versatility. But at the same time, I really enjoyed making that track using this device, and there's nothing that's going to say to me, oh gee, I couldn't make records over and over with this device. So just the inevitable. It's a simplish instrument with a limited feature set, but a nicely thought through feature set. So in terms of what's the negative, where's its downside, there kind of really isn't. It's up to you to make the most of it that you can. Righto, walking through the instrument as I am prone to doing. This has got a little bit of sound coloration from the mastering for the track, but basically here, what this is like, you want to know what it's like 100% for yourself, go get the demo, try it. We've got the usual stuff here. Oh, there's one thing that did sort of think, well, that's a frustrating thing. Normally with TAL stuff, you can set the default patch, the initialized patch, what it opens with before you've done anything. You can't here. That one does. That does. You know, it's a little bit of a strike against you there, TAL. We know you can do it. We know you got the technology, but for some reason you didn't. I wouldn't mind having that because what you've set up doesn't suit me. Simply because he's running a sub as well. Yes, it makes the sounds, but I don't want it there, so I have to turn it on and remember to turn that off. Boo-hoo. We've got our oscillator. We can turn off. I assume that kills its processing. Sawtooth, square, pulse. The pulses don't go to nothing. That's again the very Rolandy thing. They probably go down to 10% or something or other, whereas the similar sort of timed ARP 2600 would go right to nothing. So you get that, which you will hear at on the Vienna album. I think actually the intro to Vienna is probably using that as well. But nice square / pulse, triangle wave, and sine wave. Sine sounds pretty clean, but it also sounds kind of fat, which is to be expected. The fact that it doesn't sound perfectly clean is just because this is not trying to be some kind of digital instrument. We can adjust our overall level, and we can fly in FM from oscillator 2. So that's already on board. You can also do the same thing from your thing. I'm sure you can. I thought I did it. Maybe I didn't. Maybe it's just here. But nonetheless, you can FM 2 from oscillator 2 to oscillator 1 and ring mod between oscillators 1 and 2. But it's not really designed as an FM synth. It's the older style of the idea of being able to add more gritty to things that you'd be looking at. That's interesting. It works even with that off. Didn't see that one coming. Because I didn't play around with FM in that way. How I did it, I can't remember. You can also hard sync to oscillator 3. Which is not affected by your oscillator form, which is fair enough, you wouldn't expect it to be, but it is affected by tuning. So what that does is has oscillator 1 restart its waveform every time oscillator 3 restarts its waveform. So if we had our pair of sine waves, you can see the little wiggly worm there, if we had the pair of them and they were both operating at exactly the same speed, starting the same place, operating the same speed, we'd get no change. But the moment that, say, oscillator 3 is going faster, it's changing its wiggly worm is running faster, so therefore it hits its start point, then it's going to cause oscillator 1 to get partway through its wave and then go back and start again. So it's going to get if we've got that sine, we've got a nice smooth wiggly worm, and then and it starts again. So we end up with a strangely shaped wave with a hard edge on it, which is why suddenly it gets hard and a sense of otherwise tuned. And that was used to great effect in lead sounds. You'll hear it all over records by, like, say, the Cars, the early Cars records, using the hard sync to help give this gnarly, guitar-y, but not like a guitar sound coming out of their oscillators. Double-click to make things go away. Tuning, of course, we can go plus minus 2 octaves. So a 4 range, not a full range. There may be ways with the modulator to make that go further. I didn't try it. I know with Reason synths, things like Thor, you can often push things way past what the knob would do by using another controller to say, yeah, I know you only moved that, but now I'm moving you that. Try it, see how you go, and then fine-tuning as well. You can invert the wave, so where the wiggly worm starts by going down and then going up, it would then go up and go down. That is useful for situations where you are doing things like this. No, that's not working. Play with it. Sometimes where your waves are out of sync with each other or opposite from each other, you will get a different sound. All depends on sort of where you're at. If you find that doesn't do a lot, don't panic. It's not a failing of the synth. It's just the nature of the laws of physics. But there are situations in which you will get a different sound. Panning and phase. This is offsetting the start point for our oscillator. So what if we change our sync? Again, you're not necessarily going to get a lot of sound out of that because it's related to having another oscillator on the line. Hear how our tone changes because the relationship between those two oscillators is now different, so they enhance or cancel each other out differently. It's pretty standard stuff, nice to use, but yes, it will jag as you move it because it can't help but do that because you're asking it to restart the wave every time you move it, so probably not a thing you want to modulate a lot. And you can also set it so this appears that every time you play that it re-triggers the note. So if you're looking for a more definite start, like a Juno 106 DCO type thing, then that's probably the thing to cause the oscillator to be the same every single time. We've then got the ability to add in multiple voices. We'll use a saw for that. So the super saw type thing. Simple, but nice, and it works well. Cool, I'll turn that off. Oscillator 2 is exactly the same. Oscillator 3 is a little different. So let's pull 2 out. As soon as we've got oscillator, notice how that's an octave below. It's a little strange in that the decision is already there that this is going to be a sub-oscillator. As you know, not really a fan of sub-oscillator. I'm happy for the ability to use it as a sub-oscillator. Personally, I would rather that it had the same tuning and then I could just drop it by 12 semitones and make it into a sub-oscillator. Otherwise, to make it a matching oscillator, I have to pull it up by the 12 semitones. Again, not the end of the world, but I just don't dig sub-oscillators. Never really have. It's probably some kind of deep personal failing. We can now take information from certain places and fly them in to do certain things. You can tell where you can take a signal from as opposed to where you can send a signal to. So you don't have the ability to plug anything anywhere, which is a limit compared to, say, UHI's ACE, which is any cable anywhere, any cable everywhere or something like that is what it stands for. But you can take an LFO out. We know it's an out because it's green, and we can whack it to an input like that. So we click it, and then this box appears. For the moment, nothing is assigned. If we click this again, then we are assigning our LFO-ism. Simple as that. We want to open it up, we click. Okay, don't fully understand that. Can't say I used it. Read the manual on that one, honestly. And then you've got various different ways of controlling things, including MPE. So here, you see where I've been a little annoyed with some other modular type things, where assigning something, say, through a secondary system, like a mod wheel, has been a little annoying. This is right there. There isn't any way to see your modulations as such, in that there isn't a mod matrix. But with the nature of the instrument, that it's not too complex, and it's fairly visual and consistent and not overblown, then I didn't ever feel like, oh, what's going where? So pretty simple. The fact that you can see how much things are assigned, yeah, it's a little funny opening the thing, but, you know, it works just fine. If we want to get rid of it, simple, open it up, click the kill button, bye-bye gone. Nice and simple. You can FM, but I think that the fact that you've got to assign and then open it up is a little annoying, but I'm not sure whether that's working on the actual FM or moving the FM knob. I think it's working on the FM knob, not actually applying FM, because otherwise they're really slow. But whatever, it is a sound option, and it's interesting in its own way. You can also access things like detune, and they won't do anything until you have multiple voices already set up. Now, it's easy to think, why would I ever do that? But in Europa, it's not uncommon for me to actually adjust the detune amount over time, whether that be through an envelope or an LFO. It adds a kind of a nice movement that's not the same as just a straight vibrato type thing. So kudos for opening that up as an option. You only had so many things, and you gave that one, which is a good call. Oscillators, all, as I said, essentially the same. Filters. Filters, we've got a pair of them. They can run in parallel, which means that you've got this one and you've got this one, and they really don't connect to each other, or serial, which means that you go into filter 1, go out of filter 1, into filter 2. That's the most common use that you'll have for it. It definitely appears that, cut off at 50,000, that's pretty extreme. Seeing a lot of real analog synths often didn't go above about 8K. Yeah, good on you. It probably, hopefully, means that it's out of the game and therefore not working at all. There isn't an actual turn this one off option, so I assume that if it's up there, it's probably out of the game. Either way, CPU hasn't been a problem at all. It wasn't an issue remotely with all the instances in that piece. Okay, it's not a trillion, but I've had other synths that I've reviewed that have been like, oh, that was a bit extreme. So our models. Again, kind of that Roland-y sort of a sound. Resonance, this could get squeaky. They do squeak nicely. Oh, you can choose what is assigned generally to them. You've got a low pass 3, which for some bizarre reason people seem to assume is a TB303, that it had a 3-pole filter, and don't know where that one came from. Low pass 2, which is a softer SEM style thing. So the Oberheims tended to have a 2-pole and will work nicely for strings and things like that. So if you feel like your filter is a little heavy-handed, and that you're sort of like, oh, I just need a little less filtering because it's too... Then look at your 2-pole. You may need to pull this back a little if you don't want all the brightness, but you will find it a lot more subtle overall, more just generally sort of smooth and elegant. So don't say, oh, well, I need more poles every time, because there are plenty of times where you don't want more poles. We can assign this to follow the keyboard, but the keyboard hinge is not on metal C. It seems to be down at note 0. Not my preferred way of doing it. So when you change your thing, you'll find that it gets brighter up top, but it doesn't get duller down bottom. So you may need to, if you're assigning keyboard follow, you may need to rejig your main filter point. It's one of those options. Not my favorite, but it's one of those options. We can then fly in from ADSR 1, which is actually ADSR 2, because that one is set to amp. They will click, which is normal, so just raise them ever so slightly. Fairly long envelopes, which is nice. Don't know what the times are, they don't tell us, but they're long enough to be like, oh, nothing's happening there, and that's good. That's how it should be. So that's our 2-pole with a little bit of resonance. Different situations. That's giving us more of a horn type sound. trumpety sort of thing. Oh, we've still got the... So, use your different types. One pole is going to be very subtle. What does resonate? Sometimes they don't. So you might consider something like, let's say we've got a 2-pole. Let's get rid of that. And we just generally want to take some of the extra tops off. We could do it with a 4, but you'll notice it tends to get a little too... So don't be afraid to mix and match just a little bit. There is the ability to put saturation in. It's relatively mild. I didn't work out 100% where it was, but I kind of got the impression it was between the filters. But it won't replace a nice external unit that's going to give you a little bit of saturation. So don't feel like, oh, well, that's going to be the solution for all my saturation stuff. Nothing against it. It's sometimes seems to add something, sometimes seems to get distorty, but that's to be expected. It's distortion. But it's not designed to give you necessarily the joys of saturation. This filter really is the same as the first one. You can set the pair to be controlled by one knob. You could have done it from here, but they've given us one knob, which is kind of cool, so we don't need to set it up. So if we did something like having a band pass, this gets a little sensitive. So it's you might even consider something like that's probably a bit quiet. So you've got quite a few options there for how you control things, but therefore we're not going to get a result. So you might choose to put your big knobs in a particular place, and then, like if we go, I'll put that there. But just understand you do lose some resolution. If you're after finer resolution for automation, then wobble this one. But if you've got a relationship between these two and you want to keep it, then you can do that. So it gives you a level of versatility which sometimes is pointless, other times is really quite useful. We've got a pile of sources which are outside of the particular things, like we've looked at the ADSRs and quickly looked at the LFOs. We'll spend a little bit more time with them later. But if you're after things like velocity, let's say I want velocity control my cutoff. So sometimes it's cool to have a sound doing that in a mix. It's very old school techno, but with very minimal note work, you get quite a lot of movement because people feel like they're hearing an up and down from the movement of the filter. Or, of course, if you're just looking to soften things up a little, so it gives you a little bit more organic kind of movement. There is no reason that we can't take multiple things from the one thing. We might even say, let's go a little sharp as we go bright. It's changing our relationship based upon the velocity thing. So whether there's a limit as to how many things you can put into any jack, I don't think there is. Practically, there isn't. Of course, we can take mod wheel, breath, pitch wheels. I didn't look up what alternate was, but these are other things. Random noise. Okay. Oh, okay. Random looks like that's probably what we were sort of looking at. Random seems like it probably... Okay, that's cool. I didn't notice that before. I didn't really look too closely. There's like, oh, that's performance stuff. But that is nice. So it's a particular value gets output every time a note is triggered. It's not going to keep moving, so it's not an LFO. Some synths don't have a standard, like a stock output a random value on each trigger, each note gate, and that can be a little sad. So if you want to analogize it, then you can apply a little bit there. Now I assume there's possibly only one random source. Let's apply this high. Yeah, there's only one, it's only outputting one amount, which is understandable. Slightly sad because to do this nicely, we would need 3 or 4 random things. So, because at the moment we're using the one source, means that our pitch goes up, our oscillator goes, our filter goes up. Whereas if we had, say, 3 sources, we could have one oscillator with one random amount, second oscillator with a second random amount, filter with another random amount. If we had more random sources, we could have a random amount to the LFO speed. All of these things will give us a more organic thing, because an analog synth that's unstable is moving all over the place. It's not moving everything like this. It's doing this all the time, which makes it interesting or annoying. So that allows you to loosen it up, should you so desire. I'm intrigued to know what this noise thing is. And now I've got several things, and it gives me... Okay, so plain and simple, just adding a little bit of noise. So that could be applied to here, let's say. So if we turn this one off. Uh-oh, that wasn't the right one. That's the right one. Grittied up that oscillator a little bit. That's rather nice. We've added some movement from everything being slightly different note to note. We've also grittied that oscillator up, which is cool. So then I'm tempted to know, what do these wee fellas do? Should have looked at them more later or before, but... Okay, so they're just a plain and simple, you can use this single value to move something. For a while you won't really know what to do with them, and suddenly you'll go, oh, that would be useful. If only I could just always move that. So I talked about that before with regards to tuning. So let's see what we can do here. If I tune that all the way up. Yeah. So that allows us to move our range by another in this case 2 octaves, and seeing there are a pair of them, you could probably move by 4 octaves. So that allows you to apply a steady signal to move something from where it was before. Chunky! And you can see that it's green if it's positive and red if it's negative. Cool. We'll turn that off. We don't really need it. Key track, that means that we can handle things across our keyboard. We did that with the filter. The MPE stuff I'm going to leave alone because I don't have one of them weird rubber keyboards. The ADSRs, we've got the ability to reshape our attack, decay, release. That seems to be making that decay so that it actually holds longer before it lets go. So it'll give you a fatter sound. See how that's quite short? And that becomes fatter. So it's a little like a hold. So if you're wanting a really short bass, but then find that it just ends up being like a tick, 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 rather than a bob, 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 then changing that. Whether they're linear in the middle, I am not 100% sure, but it's a little different from what I'm used to. But once you get used to the feel of, oh, okay, moving that knob does that, then you will find that you do just dandy. My guess is that maybe at 50% they're probably linear, in which case it's probably dropping off pretty sharp at 0 and then belling out at 100. That feels like what's happening here. Cool. If you want to change the feel of the sound, it's amazing how much you can change with the way the envelopes move. So don't think that they're kind of useless. Play with them, set up your sounds, like say we've got our filter here moving. Cool. And that's actually changed the feel of our sound because we're changing how the movement happens over time. And even though our filter and oscillator are exactly what they were before, it feels different. Cool. We have a noise oscillator which is able to be sent to the filter, and we can move it from white to brown, like pink somewhere around there. I'm not sure how perfectly white it really is, but that's fine. You rarely want real white noise. It tends to be a bit... I wouldn't mind at all if it went from pink right the way down to brown, pink being like hi-hat noise, but it works just dandy, and of course you can then output that to various things. So we've got a noise as a source there, and then we've got noise as a source here, which we can be feeding into our filters. So if we want a little bit of extra noise to beef things up, very, very nice. Simple, does the job. The macro knobs, just relatively sort of self-evident. You will use them when you want to use them to control something. So if I set up, say, vibrato to here, rather than using my mod wheel, I might choose to use a P knob. they don't seem to have individual outs on them, so they're just a modifier. But having the ability to have more modifiers than just your mod wheel is actually a nice thing, even if initially you think, why would I need them? Anytime you're going, yeah, I want to assign that to there, but I don't always want that to be that value, it's going to be much easier to control that over time with one of these fellas than these, because it's possible these don't even automate. I didn't try it, but these ones definitely should automate. Tell me if they don't, but they should. You've got a third ADSR exactly the same as the first two of them. LFOs, just a pair of LFOs. More LFOs would be nice, but probably not necessary. And increasingly, good quality DAWs are coming with a pretty nice modulation system. Obviously, Reason has a superb modulation system. Bitwig has got a doozy of a modulation system. Can't remember there being one in Cakewalk at all. Reaper does have one. It's not as elegant as I would like, but it is there if you want to set up a fairly static LFO that's going to move something or whatever. No doubt, being Reaper, it's moving and changing, but a lot of DAWs now do have the ability to create and fly modulation into things, in which case a certain amount of your modulation doesn't need to be done on board, it can probably be flown in from somewhere else. So we played with these before. We can take this and whack it into something like this. Oh, remember to turn it up. Trigger means that it triggers, it starts its form again every time we press a key. That, you notice it doesn't. Sometimes you will want it triggered, sometimes you will not want it triggered. If you're after a more organic feeling sound, you are often better not having it triggered. But if you're needing that sort of DCO tight bass sound where it sounds the same every single time, put it to triggered. There are sync options. And then mono means that there's one global LFO rather than hear how they're beating out of time with each other sort of thing, because each one has triggered with each voice. But mono means there's just the one. So you can have variations of those, which will give you different feels based upon different synths over different times used to have those. In the early days, there would be one global LFO, so absolutely everything. You've seen that in the reviews with the Juno 60s and the Bassline 101 and the Mercury, that there's one LFO and everything. So it was later, I know, with my Emax 2. The Emax 1, I don't think it did it, I can't remember, but I know the Emax 2, there was that button where you could have the one LFO voice triggered. And the manual explained, thanks Craig Anderton, that if you put the trigger on and you were playing, like playing, not mastered in with on your DAW, then if you're playing a string, then it would tend to sound a little richer, which is because each of those LFOs is actually running slightly separately from the others, therefore you end up with a richer sound. So it wasn't until mid-80s at least that you even begun to get the option for an LFO that was per voice. We have a slew, so easiest to hear it here. If we get into sample and hold, hear how that's rounding the hard edges off. Slew, lag, similar. So if you've got a square and you don't want it to sound so on-off, or if it's causing clicks and pops, as they're prone to doing with panning, you can soften that up. So we might kill that off there. Let's take this out and pan it. We might need to turn these other oscillators off. I think that's a little softened already. I'm not hearing clicks. Now, for some reason, that doesn't seem to be giving me full pan. It is moving, but it's not moving 100% of the way. I've got no effects on. But often in this sort of situation, you would get a click or a pop. So if you do find that you're using something and you get this annoying click or pop as it goes through its cycle, then your slew is a way of lagging to make that easier. LFO2 really is exactly the same as LFO1. You've got a pair of them, you can wire them to stuff. Cool, it really is simple as that. The modulation envelope is allowing you to take, let's go with the frequency of this fella, and turn this one on. So we're not doing anything at the moment. We want it to be unipolar, that is correct. Okay, so it's in tune at the moment. We can double click or click and give ourselves a... We need our speed to be a lot higher. Now, what was the speed? Oh, one shot is probably what we want if we're going to create an envelope. Yeah, it's tied to tempo all the time. I didn't love that. It's not as versatile as it could be, but you will get there. So rather than going, oh, no, this sucks or whatever, you will get there. So we've created a pitch thing there. Let's pop this back in. Ah, the old duck cat sound. Let's pull that back a little bit and pull back our resonance because that's not helping anyone. That gives us that nice movement on the beginning of the sound, and that's a lot of what made 80s brass sounds work so super well. Not the best graphical envelope ever, but it has its charms. Again, the sequencer, I'm not going to get into. It will let you do that kind of stuff. I'll leave you to work that out. The effects, high pass, useful, EQ, go broad or narrow. Surprisingly useful. Initially you'll go, or you'll make the mistake of going, where's the bass? And but it's not really what it's designed to do. Find a frequency at which you feel like you're adding something to the instrument or want to take it away from the instrument. So it's just a general broad way of saying, yeah, look, I'm going to modify that a little bit. See it as more like a filter than an EQ per se. Chorus. Chorus 1, chorus 2, a pair of them. And wet dry, balance the delay. I did find obtuse. You can sync it, should you be so. But look at this, it's 2 seconds. It goes out to like 4 seconds. I don't get it. It's just like such a huge amount of time. 2 seconds is absurd. A second is common sort of time. So it just makes it very difficult to easily dial in the number of seconds you want. But to be fair, you can shift. So, but why it's working in seconds rather than milliseconds, I don't know, because that's 190 milliseconds. So I don't get it. I then find the feedback goes into self-oscillation super easily. There are reasons to want to do that, but we can have a high and low. You can also change the length left to right, but you can't modulate it. It's kind of a weird delay in that sense. It's not to say it doesn't have its uses, but by the time I've worked out how to make it work, I'd rather use something outboard, probably one of my own. And there are options, and well, obviously seem to be more options as well. There's a version of his reverb in here. Again, I find it a little strange, but it doesn't mean that you can't use them to set up a sound the way you want. I'm just so used to the tools that I use and outboard options that I will go with them rather than what's on board. But if you don't have other things, or you're going to get a feel for how they work, there is nothing wrong with them. They are not effects that immediately make your instrument sound bad or weird. I've talked about some effects where you've got the synth that's doing a fairly nice job of sounding organic, and you turn on an effect and you're just like, oh, that just ruined it. And there's no way you can make that effect ever really sound nice. These do have some of the Rolandy analogy kind of know-how built into them. I just think they're cut downs and simplified for the instrument. He's obviously hoping that you're going to go, hey, well, that's a bit useful, but not as useful as it should be. I better go buy the Dub X. And honestly, if you needed another delay, then you would be better off with his Dub X than this, which is kind of limited. But do a little bit of your delaying here and a little with the Dub X, and you're probably going to get where you need to. I'm just funny about onboard sounds. Well, that really walks through our instrument. That's all of what it does. It does have a pile of presets. They tend to be in the sort of early techno-y kind of thing, and that's fine. If I were making sounds, people would be like, oh, why are these so old-fashioned? But it's really what they do in the mix more than how they sound on their own. As an instrument, again, I think that it is very good value for money because it's surprisingly easy to get started. You can do most of what you need to do without actually plugging any of the cables in. They allow you to expand your palette of what you can move to where, in which case that's really rather good because they become bonus on top of a basic but very capable instrument already. So is it the best, most powerful synth ever? No, but most of them are a nightmare to use anyway and not as big as they're claimed to be. Does it do what it says it's going to do on the website? Most definitely. And if you settle with it and find how to make it feel comfy, then I think you can do an awful lot with it, as you see, with sort of basically straight out of the box and really no time spent at all. I delivered a rather charming little piece that for anybody who's a Gary Newman fan or whatever would be going, yeah, I see what you did there. Any questions in general, ask them on down below, please, after hitting the subscribe button, because the subscribe button does tell YouTube that we're valued, and that helps to rank. So if you're asking for something from us or are enjoying this program, please let YouTube see that, so it helps us to continue to do this, because there's a lot of effort, a lot of cost that goes into making a program like this. If it's an audio type question and not a support question, because I can't support TAL's staff as such, obviously he has his own support department. But if it's an audio type question, please make a little video and link to it so that way I can see and hear, rather than giving you sort of vague answers that probably don't help anyone at all. Again, Benedict for higher hertz. There's also higherhertz.com. So same name, just whacker.com on it with a different path of information. You have a great day.